listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Zach Bechtold and Matt Franks. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast and check us out online at beardedtheologians.com. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold.
This week on the Bearded Theologians, we're going to spend about the next 5 weeks looking at the book of James. That's in your Bible. That's Martin Luther's least favorite book in the Bible, so much so that he really didn't want it in the canon. And so we're just going to move through the book of James. We'll have some kind of guiding questions on our website, and we just would love for you to be in the conversation with us as we make this journey together. And so, Zach, as we begin the looking into the book of James, what are some things that come to your mind going from here?
Well, I think anytime we dive into Scripture, but in particular into a whole book, I think we have to kind of lay out the context and the background of the book. And so with James, what we have, or who we have here, at least what we have here is James, who is the brother of Jesus. And so you have to figure with that comes a little bit of experience and weight that James kind of knows what's up. He knows what he's talking about. And then I think, so knowing who James is and where he's coming from, I think the next thing we have to really look into is who is James writing to? And we find from the beginning of the opening of James's letter here that he's writing to the 12 tribes. The 12 tribes. And so we kind of gather who James is, who he's writing to, and that lets us form why he's writing and doing the things, saying the things that he is. And so he jumps right into it and says, "Dear brothers and sisters, when trouble comes your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy." And I think this sticks out to me for a couple of different reasons. In particular, I'm preaching the Beatitudes, or just finished preaching the Beatitudes, and that's exactly what Jesus ends the Beatitudes with. Persecution's going to come your way. Rejoice in that, because if you're being persecuted for something I said and something living into Jesus, into Christ-like ways, then that's a good thing, because you're doing what you're called to be doing. And so for James to start off with that, I think is important. We get to see a little bit of what and who James is talking to and what they're going through. And I think he starts off with a bit of encouragement here.
So thinking about that, I always kind of thought of the book of James is almost proverb-like, in a sense that he's addressing issues and kind of giving some words of wisdom, and I've always just that's kind of where I've thought about that. And so as I've dived into this, always kind of reflecting on what am I trying to learn, or what are the words trying to say to me and speak to me that may be applying right now in my life, or some things, maybe some for the tools down the road. And in here we hear that there's going to be various tests you encounter as occasions of joy. I like that statement. My brothers and sisters, think of the various tests you encounter as occasions of joy. And I see that as like our mindset matters. And far too often, it's amazing to see that when like someone's going through like a terminal illness, that they like kind of take it full force with I've got this, or, it's really in God's hands, and not necessarily like super joy, like, Christmas joy, but in a sense of joy that this isn't going to kill me. And far too often we look at something, and if it doesn't go our way, instead of trying to find the joy in it, and maybe whatever positive, maybe even if it's a small little positive, I think we get so hung up on the negative, and our world is so negative, that maybe we need to take this in consideration, that we should encounter these kind of occasions, the tests that we face in life, as for occasions of joy. And that's just, that's kind of one of the first things as we kind of dive into this that comes out to me.
I would agree. And I think one of the ways we do that is asking that question of where do we see God at work in this? It allows us to push through that negativity and to see see where God's at work and see what's going on. See what joy you can pull out of, maybe a crappy situation.
And one of the things to take note is, and I don't know about what translation the listener you're listening with, but I utilize the Common English Bible, and one of the things it talks about is that this whole idea of mature is kind of the you think of it as being complete or a whole, and when we're mature in our faith, we really do lack nothing. We find ourselves, we know what we need and we know how to get it, and we can, we're adults in that situation. And sometimes in our faith, maybe we're not there yet. Maybe we don't know how to grow in our next step. Maybe we need guidance, and maybe that maturity comes when we find it, or we find our place, and we can be fully utilized. And when we think of being mature, we think of those older adults, when you're a teenager, you think, oh man, I can't wait, I can't wait to be a mature adult. And I'm still trying to wrestle with what that really means in this day and age. Cause I think that we have high expectations when we think of mature. And I think that's what James is getting at is to, be full into it, be mature.
Well, and I'm reading out of the NRSV and another one, but the way the NRSV lays it out says, "Let endurance have its full effect, so that you may be mature and complete." And part of endurance, as well as I do, if you're running a long race, there's some effects there. You're gonna need to sprint at some point. You're gonna have to conserve your energy. You're gonna be dog tired. You're gonna want to lay down and cry. And there's gonna be joy in it all when it's done, hopefully. But I think too often when we're going through crap in our lives, that we get to a point we just give up and we stop. And we don't let that endurance have its full effect. I don't know if as a people, if we're willing to go through the peaks and valleys of life fully, or if we just walk away too often.
Well, and that leads into verse 12. Those who stand firm during testing are blessed. They are tried and true. Mm-hmm. It's easy to say, that this will get better. There's light at the end of the tunnel, all that stuff. But when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to see the outcome, especially if it's a difficult situation. But even in joyful situations, we don't want this to end. But when it ends, we have that feeling of either joy or, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that that's done. And I think that those battle scars, they make us stronger. And they remind us not to do again, like that one on top of your head there that you can kind of see. And those situations help make us better. And I think that like you think of pastors, that pastors take that with them. They take those battle wounds and they hopefully grow from them and be better because of the lumps that they've taken throughout the years.
Right, and it's those lumps that make us who we are, and I think that's what builds our faith, knowing that we're going to take some lumps, there's going to be some ups and downs, but God's right there with us, walking along with us, and giving us that guidance, giving us that peace to make it through another day, make it through another valley, or take another lump, and that makes us who we are.
So these tests that we face, we notice that in 13, he says, no one who is tested should say, God is tempting me. This is because God is not tempted by any form of evil, nor does he tempt anyone. Everyone is tempted by their own cravings. They are lured away and enticed by them. Once those cravings conceive, they give birth to sin. And when sin grows up, it gives birth to death. So Zach, as you wrestle with that, what are some things that kind of come up with you?
That's a really fun thing that James says there, because we have this idea in this theology here today that, God's not going to give us anything that we can't. And when I hear that, I think of this verse, because I don't think God tests us. And I think that's what James is reminding us here is, no, God's not out there, or, standing wherever God stands and throw and test your way to see if you stumble or fall or see if you can handle it or not. No, that's not of God. That's not God's purpose. And yet there's this whole idea that, well, this came at me today, and that's God testing me to make sure my faith is solid. No, no, it's not. God's going to be with you in those moments. But it's like James says here, God can't be tempted, but one is tempted by their own desires. It's those desires within us that capture our hearts, that capture our feelings, and in that we act out, that we want to go and pursue, and that wholly we pursue. If we blame it on God testing us, there's no accountability there. There's no ownership in us actually saying, I messed up. I shouldn't have done that today. It has nothing to do with anything but you and your own desires and what you want.
Well, and as I was thinking about that, and thinking about what you're saying, is that we put ourselves in those places and situations where sometimes we refuse to take blame because we don't want to admit that we screwed up.
Right.
Or we don't want to admit that we live let's say a guy who, ate tons and tons of meat, didn't do any exercising, didn't do anything, gets a heart attack and suffers for the rest of his life. And he tries to blame that on God. And no, that's your fault. You're the one that chose to live the unhealthy, you're the one that made that decision that caused your body to shut down. And, it's always hard when we're sitting with people that are struggling with that. They're like, no, this can't be this way. And it's like, no, God, doesn't just sit there and say, okay, you get a car, you get a car, you get a car. Right. Oh, you get a bag of rocks. He's not Oprah.
You get cancer.
Yeah, you get cancer. Sorry about that. Oh, you are part of genocide. That.
Right.
As we think about God and how God works in the world, we got to realize that in those bad situations, in those bad times, God is right there with us, and that sometimes God will provide for us people that will help us through those situations. Adam Hamilton refers to those as stretcher bearers. And who are your stretcher bearers?
Right.
And I think it's important to have those, but I don't think we can really force the blame on God. But what we can do is invite God in and ask God to come and be with us and help us.
No, that's exactly right. We can't blame God. We have to take ownership in that. A friend of mine yesterday, I was listening to a sermon on Sunday, or from Sunday, the other day, and he was talking about Jesus walking on water, and about how there's a miracle where Peter gets out of the boat and he walks, but then they invite Jesus. After all that happens, Peter is pulled up out of the water. They then invite Jesus in the boat. And it's through this storm, it's through these trials and tribulations, through life, that when our boat's shaky, getting out of the boat's a good thing too. But when we sink a little bit, inviting Jesus back into the boat with us is huge too. It's taking ownership in that part of, here's where I messed up, and inviting Jesus in, like you say, inviting that love and grace in, and going with it and letting it work within us.
So to kind of continue on into James, verse 19, know this, my brothers and sisters, everyone should be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to grow angry.
I don't even know why that's there, because that's the easiest thing in the world.
I was just thinking, and what we need to add to that verse, there needs to be an editorial addition, and count to 10.
Count to 10, 20, if you like me.
Anger gets us into more trouble than, I'd almost say anger gets us into more trouble than money, because you get angry that you don't have money, and then you become more angry. Anger is one of those things that it is a disease and a virus that when it gets a hold of you, it never lets go. And it just continues to build and build and build. And I've been around some very angry people. And then when we unpack why they're angry, it's over like the smallest detail. It's like, this is not something to get angry about.
Right. But that's the thing. I think you're right. I think that's a good explanation of. I think anger causes more trouble than money because not everybody has money. We get angry about not having money, but we get angry about having money. But everybody can afford anger. It's free. We all have it, and it's over the silliest things. And yeah, it's the reactionary part of anger. I think that's the worst. Somebody cut me off, in traffic, and we're going to get angry about it like it even matters.
Well, and so to kind of continue on in James, it reminds me of in that story with Jesus and Peter. When Jesus is about to be arrested, and Peter gets angry and cuts off the dude's ear. I mean, I know there's more to the story than that, and feel free to look at it. But Jesus says something there that to me is kind of points a little bit towards this: is that those who live by the sword die by the sword.
Right.
Those who live by anger die by anger. And James reminds us in 22 that we need to be doers of the word and not just only hearers who are misled. And I think of so often when people don't read the Bible or only read just like, I read Jeremiah 29:11, and not looking at the other verses, or, I read John 3:16, not really realizing that 17 is just as important as 16.
Right.
Or the big thing is that, this book, the entire Bible, is a book of how God has been active in the world and how God has continued to work and how God shows love and grace and favor when we screw up, because we screw up. And it's a reminder that this never goes on. This is something that we're going to have to continue to work with until that time comes. But until that time comes, we still have to do the work that God has called us to do, and that's to love God and to love our neighbors ourselves. And obviously we struggle with that. And I really think, when people tell me, oh, we just need to open up your Bible, that's a dangerous thing, because one, we're asking people to interpret it. And if you're not using sources to kind of test you or stretch you and get to know the scriptures, that's a big danger. If you're just reading it at face value and not diving into understanding the bigger context of that, you'll miss out on a few things, and you also miss the big point and the big picture.
Right.
And then I also think, like, the big thing for me, and this is something that I've struggled with my entire Christianity walk, as I still have held on to some of my heathenist non-following past, is that Christians miss the point. It's about love.
It is.
And we can't be afraid of the other. We need to get to love them and care for them and take care of them. And if we can do that right, and if we do it well, that's how people are going to see God's love. That's how lives are going to be touched and changed. That's how we're going to have no more war. But until we can do that, until we can actually dive in and see how Jesus lived, and to see how even in the Old Testament, none of them were perfect. I mean, we're going to talk about Moses and Tahlequah, and in Moses' life, man, there's a lot of disobedience by people that are trying to be faithful to God. And so I hope and pray that as we think about what it means to be a doer of the word, that we really kind of dive into the word. I mean, how can you be a doer of the word if you're not diving into it and actually studying scripture?
Well, that's how James puts a little bow on this section there in verse 26. If any think they are religious and do not bridle their tongues but deceive their hearts, their religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to care for the orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep ourselves unstained by the world. And it's that. We don't just hear this, we go do it. We take care of the widows and orphans. We live this out. And God, it's tough. You're right. We're not doing it. And when we pick this book up and we open it and we read it, whether it be at face value or we dig into it, it's going to mess you up, because you're going to look back and see the opportunities that you missed to do that, to take care of the widows and orphans, to love people and to love God. But that's not where we have to stay. There's grace in that. There's grace to move forward and not only continue to hear the word, but to do and to see those opportunities in front of us to love people, to love God. And that's huge, but we can't stay there. We can't stay in the hearing part. It's not I'm gonna say this, and it's probably wrong, but it's not good enough to just hear. We have to do something. And I think Jesus' life and ministry would affirm that the people that he sat around and he talked to and he healed, and there was never this just hear what I have to say. There's always a call to action. Go and do this. Get up and go. Whether it be to the Pharisees or the Gentiles, or when he was healing people, or the disciples, whomever, there's always this call to action to go and do something. Don't just hear what I have to say. Take it and do it.
So as we kind of bring this to a close this week, we're gonna have some things on our website that will kind of maybe spur the conversation. A couple of questions for you to use. Maybe this would be a good thing. We would love for you to use this as a resource, maybe for a Sunday school class or a growth group, to sit down and listen to what we have to say and dive in yourself for the word, because that's an important thing. We don't want you to just take what we said as commentary, right, and that's the word.
Because there's a lot here we didn't cover.
Right. And we want you to dig into it, because we know, we both affirm that when you dig into the Word of God, your life is touched and transformed in a way that what growing in the Word really is. And so we hope that you do that. We hope that you join us in this conversation through Facebook or our website or all the social media outlets that we are on. Go on the website, buy a couple of items. We got some great mugs, great T-shirts, all that great stuff. And so we hope you've enjoyed listening to the Bearded Theologians. And for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
And I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out.
Thank you for listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast. We hope you've enjoyed listening, and we hope that you share our content online through Facebook and social media. And we hope that you check out our Beardcast store at beardedtheologians.com and pick up some great Bearded Theologians gear. We hope you have a good day. Be doers of the word.
I fight bears.